I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we'll be hearing from returning guest Richard Silverstein of the Tikkun Olam blog about Abdul El-Sayed's win in the Michigan primary. We'll also discuss the Iran war, the Gaza Board of Peace scam, sham, grift, whatever you want to call it, and Lebanon. So, a lot to take in there. It'll be a fascinating conversation. Before we get to that, however, I need to remind you that this show is primarily listener funded, so I need your support at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. Also, if you can, support my one and only sponsor, Mike Swanson, at wallstreetwindow.com. It's a great financial and trading newsletter. I've had listeners make a return on investment thanks to Mike's trading tips. So, sign up for the newsletter at wallstreetwindow.com. And with that being said, let's get to the conversation with Richard Silverstein. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Parallax Views, a guest that I always appreciate giving his time to come on the show and share his knowledge, commentary, and insights. I'm speaking with Richard Silverstein of the Tikkun Olam blog, which tracks the unseemly activities of the Israeli National Security State. And Richard has a new article in the New Arab entitled, "As Abdul El-Sayed Wins Michigan Primary, Is It the End of AIPAC?" And we're going to get into that and much more with regards to this big victory for the left flank of the Democratic Party, I would say, for progressives that are taking on corporate donors in AIPAC. How are you doing, Richard?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being with you.
So before we get into the article itself, what do you think about this Michigan primary win? And what do you make of the sort of corporate media response to it?
Well, I think it's a huge development for the Democratic Party in general, and also for the left faction of the party, the sort of DSA faction, if you will. It's a major comeuppance for the Israel lobby, and the media has been somewhat slow to adapt to the new reality. They're still sort of oriented and aligned with the corporate centrist wing of the Democratic Party, and they have amplified the charges against al-Sayed of being anti-Semitic and being a communist and all these other things. But I think they're slowly coming around as the polling of Americans shows that, or Democrats in particular, shows that there is a passion for that wing of the party that enables them to be victorious in multiple elections that happened yesterday.
I was curious what you thought in particular of some of the. I see a lot of pundits saying, well, it's not that big of a deal because this actually shows that, candidates like El-Sayed are only popular with wealthy, educated voters. And he didn't do well with the working class or black voters. And they never mention that maybe that had something to do with the ads that were part of the Haley Stevens campaign, creating a false impression that former President Barack Obama had endorsed Stevens when he in fact hadn't. And, a lot of money being put into someone's campaign can, trick people at times. So I'm wondering what you think. I'm giving my commentary, but what do you make of this kind of coverage trying to spin it as not a big deal?
Well, there's two aspects of this. One is what you said, which is when you spend $70 million on a campaign and flood the airwaves incessantly, minute by minute, with attack ads against Al Sayed and ads trying to promote Haley Stevens, who didn't really have much of a record that she could tout of concrete achievements. Then you're going to get a built-in section of the public which is going to be influenced or believe the attacks against Al Sayed. So you have that.
Do you want to comment more on the spending campaign of Haley Stevens and also who's backing Haley Stevens?
Right. So you have several PACs, one associated directly with AIPAC, and you have two others that are aligned with AIPAC and whose donors are giving to AIPAC and to the two, I call them stealth PACs. One is the United Democracy Project, and they have spent $104 million on all of the primary elections that they supported. And 32 million of that went just to the Al Sayed campaign. They have an additional $80 million, UDP does, to spend on the rest of the campaign cycle. Now, AIPAC has already announced that they consider Al Sayed to be a danger to Jews and a danger to Israel, and they are going to do whatever they need to do to defeat him in the general election, which will be against the MAGA Republican Mike Rogers, who's lost at least two prior elections. And I would consider him, I'm calling him MAGA Mike. So we have this general election where they have up to 80 million to spend. The other stealth PAC is called the Democratic Majority for Israel. And they also have huge tens of millions of dollars that they spend on these campaigns. And in addition, I should add that AIPAC has created some stealth PACs and some nonprofits or gotten money from nonprofits who don't have to reveal their donors. And that money has gone into PACs with innocuous names like Women for Chicago, and in various elections all over the country, they've created these organizations that funnel the money and that whose names are completely misaligned with their pro-Israel purpose that as AIPAC devises it.
Now, it's interesting. You've titled the piece, Is It the End of AIPAC? Why do you believe the Michigan race represents something fundamentally different rather than simply one high profile upset of an establishment Democrat? You're saying this isn't just one race we're talking about. This is a sea change, essentially.
Yeah. Well, if we look at the New York City races, there were four candidates, primary among them being Zohran Mamdani. Now, the Israel lobby raised and spent $21 million to defeat him in the election, and they failed. He won handily against Andrew Cuomo, who is a centrist sort of establishment candidate. And then three other members of Congress were elected, also who ran against centrist, center-left incumbents. And they also won as well, and that goes back a couple of months. Al Sayed is the latest in this phenomenon, which is the realization that AIPAC can be beaten, and that you can build a grassroots people campaign filled with tens of thousands of volunteers knocking on hundreds of thousands of doors, and that campaign can go head to head with $80 million or $32 million, and it can beat the money. The people can beat the money. That's one of the things I wrote in that piece. And
they real quick, they beat a lot of money. I mean, the Israel lobby spent an unprecedented $32 million in attack ads against Al Sayed.
Yeah. And 104 million, as I just said, overall. And they're going to I predict that they're going to spend $200 million by the time November 5th or November 6th rolls around. And the Al Sayed expense was the largest that they had ever spent on a campaign. So when you go all in your poker hand and you lose, then everybody looks around and says, "Whoa, whoa, your hand wasn't as strong as you thought it was." We've been deceived by all of the strength and power that you told us you had, and that's why AIPAC. I wouldn't say that AIPAC is dead. This title of the piece is a little bit overstating it, but I would say that they're fundamentally weakened. Not on their deathbed because they've got the money and they've got the donors and they've got the oligarchs and the billionaires. So money can keep them going a long time. But the political class in Congress is starting to realize AIPAC is not invulnerable. And so you have, I would say, 10 or 20 candidates in Congress, Senate and House, who have sworn off donations from AIPAC. This is a really big development because some of those individuals took money from AIPAC in the past and won their elections because AIPAC invested lots of money in their campaigns. So the fact that these people who, by the way, politicians love money and they need money. So for them to forswear this amazingly deep well of cash is a big deal. And AIPAC makes a big to do about promoting how many of our candidates won. And yes, we were a little disappointed that we didn't win in one or two races. Well, that's sort of like hiding the lead or hiding your light under the light under a bushel, because the reality is they have been deeply wounded in this election cycle.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how this isn't just about Israel? It's not just about AIPAC. It's also about the power of the oligarchs in our country versus we the people.
Yeah, I think one important thing to keep in mind here is that in these Democratic primaries where tens of millions are being spent, that money is not coming from Democrats. That money is coming from Republican oligarchs and billionaires. And in the Mamdani election, where they raised $21 million, the vast number of the vast amounts that were raised came from Republican Wall Street donors. And so what you have here is the Republican Party attempting to sabotage the Democratic Party by intervening in the primary elections with the support of the Israel lobby in order to defeat candidates like Al Sayed, who hopefully they will not defeat, but candidates like Al Sayed, they want to train their sights on him to make sure that a moderate candidate like Haley Stevens wins and goes back to the Senate. So the Republicans want candidates that are more aligned, with them, like a John Fetterman or a Haley Stevens, or if you go back in the past, Sinema from Arizona and Manchin from West Virginia. Those are the candidates Republicans like. Those are the candidates the Israel lobby like. And those are the candidates that are going to be primaried, and a number of them are going to lose their elections because the only thing they have going for them is money. They don't have the people with them.
You also want to delve into here. There's a new Red Scare underway as we speak. We just saw the White House tweeting about how communism is the greatest threat to America. And I do think there's parallels to the way in which student activists over the past few years, as well as activists more generally and journalists that are critical of Israel, have been tarred as anti-Semitic merely for questioning the actions of the Israeli state. Do you think there is a connection, an intersection between this new Red Scare and this attack on pro-Palestinian activism?
The only thing that Republicans have going, and the Israel lobby have going for them, is money. They don't have the issues on their side. I mean, anybody with eyes in their head can see that there's a genocide going on in Gaza. They can also see that there's ethnic cleansing on the West Bank, where over 1,000 people have been killed in the past few months by settlers who've gone on a rampage there. And they can see also Israel invading Lebanon and occupying it, invading Syria and occupying it, and also joining in on the aggression that committed against Iran. So nobody is fooled by those things, and they don't have answers to them. The only thing that they've got is, like I said, is the money. So what do? They create these slogans. He's anti-Semitic, he's anti-Israel, he's a communist. The other things they're talking about El Sayed is some of the Republicans are saying that, he's not American, or that he was born in the Middle East, in Egypt, which he wasn't. He was born in Michigan. So they try to create the impression that these people are alien, that they come from outside the United States, and that they're implanting some Islamist, overthrow of the American way of life. And these are slogans that have no truth to them. They're empty slogans. And I think that the public and the average voter is starting to see through them. I don't think many people, except maybe MAGA Republicans, believe any of this. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the S word here, but I don't think that they believe
If you could
any of this.
refrain, but go on.
Yeah, I don't think that they any longer those slogans have any resonance. And you even have Donald Trump claiming that El Sayed is a communist. I mean, either these people don't know what communism is, or they don't care, and they feel like it's a bugaboo. It's a slogan that will sort of create this Pavlovian response that, that people's mouth will start watering like the Pavlov response as soon as they hear anti-Semitic or anti-Israel or communist, or whatever else you wanna mention. So yeah, I think that their position is weak and weakening by the day. And going on to a related subject, I think the result of all of this is that it has increased not only the opposition to AIPAC, but it's increased the support for DSA. It's increased the level of anti-Zionism. I consider myself an anti-Zionist Jew, and in the past, we've been a very lonely faction within the Jewish community. That's no longer the case. There are now websites that are willing to cover and discuss anti-Zionism. Even the august gray lady, the New York Times, has been willing to cover this issue, and still it's covering it from a liberal Zionist point of view, but at least it is giving some media air to the issue. And the
I was
upsurge.
not to interrupt you, but I was going to say there's especially, in my view, a widening gap between establishment organizations within the American Jewish community and younger American Jews.
Yeah, if you look at all the polls, the younger Jews are much more likely to be anti-Zionist. And by the way, the polls say that among all American Jews, 15% consider themselves anti-Zionist. And in the past, going back a decade or two, it would have been 3 or 4%. So that's huge. And also, only 37% of American Jews consider themselves Zionist. 37%. You see pro-Israel people on social media saying 95% of Jews are Zionists, and that's absolutely false. And I think this, again, is an indication that the lobby is losing support, and that the opposition to the lobby, the anti-Zionist or anti-AIPAC factions within American Jewry, are losing steam. And in addition to AIPAC, I should say, like what you talked about, other establishment organizations, we're talking about the American Jewish Committee, we're talking about the Anti-Defamation League. They're all leading this charge against the Democratic left. with these horrible false slogans.
You actually, in the article, mention a quote. You quote Peter Beinart, who said recently, I guess, that establishment Jewry has abandoned liberal democracy in the US. And you say that AIPAC is a poster child of this phenomena. So, is there an issue where we have the Jonathan Greenblatts at the ADL and AIPAC and these other organizations essentially throwing liberal democratic values under the bus for this militant sort of Zionism?
Absolutely. So if you go back to AIPAC on January 6th, they endorsed 106 members of Congress who refused to approve the election, ratify the election of Joe Biden. And what was that? What year? I forget what year that was, 2020. So those are the ones who refused to vote that he had been actually elected. 106 people they supported. And now they say they're going to put tens of millions of dollars into defeating El Sayed. Now, that means they're going to give that money to Mike Rogers, who's a MAGA Republican who supports Donald Trump. This is the primo Israel lobby organization in the United States that is going to support Donald Trump's chosen candidate. And anybody who is MAGA is destroying American democracy. So that's the case that AIPAC, as Beinart says, is undermining American democracy by supporting these candidates. And it's a shanda, the Yiddish word for something that's terrible. And I think American Jews are starting to see through that. And I think these organizations have been considerably weakened in their donor base, their membership base, and in the broader public.
Can you speak a little bit more to just as a Jewish commentator? I feel like voices like yourself and Peter Beinart feel that there has been this great betrayal of American Jewish values and history. I mean, the American Jewish community in the past has helped things like the civil rights movement, and yet now we see Jonathan Greenblatt, I would say, betraying a certain legacy within American Jewish history. I don't know if you would agree, but
Absolutely. I mean, this is going a little bit off from what you were saying, but it's related. And that is that when you look at what Israel is doing, genocide, ethnic cleansing, the Nakba, and all of these related things, the invasions of all these countries, this is not a Jewish value. This is a Zionist value. And Zionism is not Judaism. I can't emphasize that enough. Even on the left and some what I call the anti-imperialist left, there are people who are equating the two and saying that Jews are at fault for what Israel is doing. And it's very important that Jews make this distinction because Israel doesn't want anyone to do that. Israel wants to claim that it represents all of world Jewry, and it doesn't, and it shouldn't. And we have to say over and over again, genocide, ethnic cleansing, not a Jewish value. And basically what the Israel lobby is saying is that we defend Israel, which means tacitly we defend genocide, we defend all the crimes of Israel. And that no longer works.
how important do you think it is for people to connect this the sort of right wing, rabid pro Israel, anti El Said junta with the billionaire class? Because we sort of see an intersection when you have figures like Bill Ackman going after Mamdani and also going after any critics of Israel.
Yeah. And Ackman and the billionaire class I should say, were part of the backlash against the campus campsites, the encampments on campuses that were sprung up last year against the Gaza genocide. And Ackman and his cronies were responsible for the firing of the three presidents of the Ivy League universities. They're responsible for the capture of the Board of Trustees at Columbia, which betrayed those students and also allowed some of their students, like Mahmoud al-Khalil, to be arrested by ICE and not providing any support for him and for people like him who are their students. So the billionaire class is trying to protect its power and its wealth by promoting all of these sort of fake slogans and fake claims against them, against Mamdani, for example, and calling him an anti-Semite because he believes in slogans like "from the river to the sea." He believes that Israel is committing genocide. These are now labeled as anti-Semitic when they are not anti-Semitic. The claim that they're anti-Semitic is fake, but the claim that it's genocide is factual and it is reality. And that's the difference between the left and the MAGA Republicans. They're based on delusion, fantasy, and false slogans, whereas the Democratic left is based on facts, is based on an analysis of reality. Well, I just want to go back to something earlier, if I may.
Oh, free. Go ahead.
And we were talking about the claim from pundits like Matt Iglesias and others that the Democratic left has fooled the electorate into believing that they represent the working class, and instead what they really are young, elitist, college-educated professionals. They don't represent anyone outside themselves, a narrow, spectrum, and they're a fake kind of fake movement. And Iglesias even said that the media is responsible for the rise of the Democratic left because the Democratic left gives them eyeballs and they earn ad revenue by bringing eyeballs that want to hear about the Democratic left. And that's turning the Democratic left into some kind of, crux or whatever. I can't think of the right word, but that it's a tool that the media is using instead of analyzing what the Democratic left actually represents. They're looking for all sorts of chivalrous and other reasons that they're making up essentially that to explain what the Democratic left is doing. And what this does is it weakens overall the Democratic Party because you have Chuck Schumer, you have Hakeem Jeffries, you have the leadership of the party in Congress losing, their eye is no longer on the ball, which is opposing Trump aggressively and vigorously and presenting a program, an agenda, and a platform that will resonate. And anyone who claims that the Democratic left is a bunch of young elitists doesn't understand what the electorate in Michigan is. It's composed largely of working class people, and 51% of them supported El Sayed. You couldn't get 51% of an electorate who are just white, just elitist, and just college educated. You need to reach out and get a working class movement. And that's exactly what they've done.
Before we start closing out, I know this is a crystal ball type question looking into the future, but what could happen if Abdul El Sayed wins the general election? What would this mean for how Democratic candidates approach Israel and approach the issue of the oligarchs that are, I would say, ruining our country?
Well, if he wins, then you have the Democratic left actually in the Senate. And Bernie Sanders is no longer the only Democratic socialist in the Senate. And there are other progressive Democrats like Chris Van Hollen who would join them. And those voices would be amplified. Hopefully, by the way, in 2028, we're going to have a primary against John Fetterman. We'll get rid of him. And hopefully there'll be a progressive candidate there in Pennsylvania who isn't Josh Shapiro. But this is I wouldn't say it's a death knell, but it's huge in terms of weakening the Israel lobby, which I have talked about here, and also making members of Congress themselves doubt their establishment leadership and perhaps toppling Chuck Schumer, toppling Kristen Gillibrand, the senator from New York, who actually called Mamdani a jihadist before the election. And people like that will lose credibility and be toppled from their leadership positions. And hopefully someone like Chris Van Hollen or somebody else who's progressive in the Senate will take over. Somebody else progressive in the House will take over. Now, we may have a Democratic majority in the Senate and the House. The Senate will be difficult, but it's possible. And the House definitely, almost definitely, will have a Democratic majority. Now, who's going to become the Speaker of the House? Will it be Hakeem Jeffries, who's proven himself ineffective at opposing Trump? Or will it be somebody like El Sayed, who's going to be in the Senate, but somebody in the House like him, who's going to really take it to Trump, who's going to promote an agenda that supports the working class, that supports medical care for all, that tries to undo all of the damage that he's done to the U.S. agencies like the CDC and the Department of Education and USAID, is going to fight back against that, fight back with lawsuits to try to oppose everything that Trump is doing. And that's what needs to happen. And El Sayed's victory, if it happens, will be a big step towards that.
I hope it's okay to ask you a bit of a devil's advocate question in the sense of I have contacts that are establishment or centrist Democrats that will say, well, I get why you agree with the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, but the thing is, in the general, Republicans are going to use all the smears, the usual smears of communism, socialism, scary, ooh, left wing, radical, blah, 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 blah. And even if you agree with the Bernie Sanders wing, you know, the socialism boogeyman is going to hurt the Democratic Party. What do you say to those sort of centrist Democrats or establishment Democrats that try to make that argument? I'm just curious.
Well, I think that if you continue with the centrist establishment candidates, they're going to start losing elections.
Well, they're definitely going to
And
alienate progressives.
yeah, well, they alienate progressive, and the reason they're going to lose elections is because they no longer have the liberal progressive wing of the party with them, and that's a very steady, stable group that will vote down the line for you as long as you have liberal and progressive platform, which the Democrats currently don't really have. You have Chuck Schumer, by the way, reading letters and up in public and saying, I wrote this strong letter to Donald Trump. And, big friggin' deal. You wrote a letter. What impact is that going to have? You have to do something concrete. Put your body in the path of what Trump is doing. And that's what El Sayed is going to do. That's what Bernie is doing. And that's what's necessary. So, the party is going to be very severely weakened if they don't learn that lesson.
I also wanted to go off topic here and ask you just for your thoughts on what we've seen transpiring with this board of peace fiasco with Gaza. And I guess Trump was saying, well, we're going to get this deal done. And then I mean, it seems like Netanyahu has squashed that from happening. I wanted your commentary on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I just wrote a blog post about that, which people can read at Tikkun Olam, my my blog. The Board of Peace is a sham. It's an entity that was created basically by Trump and for Israel. Nothing that it's doing is going to help Palestinians in Gaza, even though the outline of what they're doing is supposedly going to stabilize Gaza and turn Gaza into a stable, secure place. And the Gazans themselves are going to all of a sudden, get the housing, which, by the way, everything in Gaza is basically destroyed. They're going to build tens of thousands of new units of housing, and they're going to have security, and they're going to have hospitals rebuilt, et cetera, et cetera. There's no evidence whatsoever that they can do that. They have presented it as a shiny document. They call it either the new Rafah, which is one of the major parts of Gaza, or the new Gaza. And, when in the past, it was Jared Kushner with these villas on the beach in Gaza. That was his vision. Now we don't see villas anymore, but we do see a plan by the Board of Peace to create what they call a humanitarian zone, which the Washington Post has falsely claimed it will be a community of 50,000 Palestinians who will be put into this zone, which is basically a detention camp. Israel will vet them for their ties to Hamas, and it will essentially control access to the place in terms of people leaving or coming. That's why I call it a concentration camp. So, and the other thing is they're going to provide these people with jobs because they're going to create a Gaza tech park, which is going to give these 50,000 people tech jobs, as if tech is going to be the answer to all the problems Gazans face, which, by the way, is food, water, medical care, education. Those are the things they really need. Plus, they need political rights. None of that is going to happen. And it's all in these shiny plans that they have. And the other thing is that Israel now claims, which is actually contradicts the original document that the Board of Peace created. Israel now claims that before we withdraw from Gaza, which is one of the demands in the original document, the Hamas has to disarm. And they have to disarm not only their light weapons, but their heavy weapons. The original document says that has to be simultaneous. Now, all of a sudden, Israel wants Hamas to go first. Why would Hamas trust Israel that after it lost all of its weapons, the resistance, the ability to resist the occupation, why would they trust that the Israelis are going to withdraw? They'd have to be insane to trust. And they don't, of course. And that's why it's going to fail. When the UN, not UN, but the former UN Human Rights Commissioner, Nicholas Mladov, met with Netanyahu, he took the side of Israel and said that Hamas must disarm first. It contradicts directly his own Board of Peace, who he's representing, the original document. So the Board of Peace is meaningless, and any media reporting that reports this without skepticism and without noting how ineffectual the Board of Peace has been and essentially not done anything that it claimed it was going to do. By the way, they claimed that they were going to get all these Arab nations to contribute troops to create security in Gaza. Nothing has happened. They claim they're going to get countries to accept. By the way, Israel has created this concept of freedom of movement. What they mean is that they're going to persuade Gazans to leave Gaza, and then the Board of Peace is going to recruit countries that will accept these refugees. Guess what? No country has ever signed on the dotted line and said that they were going to do that. So it's all a mirage. It's all a chimera, and it's all fake.
Do you think that out of curiosity, so the news came out I think a day or so ago that Trump is now trying to charge for access to his early Truth social posts, which, given that he can, move markets just with a single tweet, that I think there's money to be made in that, right? Do you think the Board of Peace is similarly sort of a money-making
Oh,
grift?
oh, absolutely. I mean, who's leading the Board of Peace? Tony Blair. Tony Blair is someone who, after he stepped down as Prime Minister of Great Britain, became an international consultant who was employed by various countries to lobby for their interests internationally. So he is making making money off of his supposed international connections. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in the last 10 or 20 years since he left office. And I don't know how much he's being paid to do what he's doing, but you can be sure it's in the millions or tens of millions of dollars. So there is a grift going on. There's no question about it, a grift going on. And you can be sure that Trump, when he leaves office, is going to parlay all of these relationships that he's created with all these countries. By the way, the country's paying $1 billion to be members of the Board of Peace. All of these countries are going to be able to go to and say, I want to build a golf course. I want to build a resort like what Jared Kushner is trying to do in Albania, basically stealing this beachfront property and creating a multi-billion-dollar resort there. That's what they're going to leverage when they leave office. Now, he's already earning billions of dollars. He earned $5 billion from crypto in his first 2 years in office. So this is the Board of Peace is a money machine for them. And the people who are members of the Board of Peace are members because they want access to Trump and they want access to Jared Kushner and access to Tony Blair because it serves their national interests. So the whole thing is a grift, and it's really depressing in some sense. But the silver lining is the Board of Peace represents nothing, represents no one, and is not going anywhere. So that's the only silver lining, if you could call it that.
Do you think this is also true with whatever Trump wants to do with Lebanon? Because I'm having a guest on, I believe, sometime next week that's an expert on Hezbollah and the region that says, Trump is just going to run into the hard wall of reality, even with his plans with Lebanon and trying to sideline Hezbollah.
Well, what Trump and Rubio have tried to do is to bifurcate Hezbollah from the Lebanese government and trying to say that Hezbollah is an alien body grafted upon the Lebanese people, even though Hezbollah is one of the most powerful political entities in Lebanon, not just militant militia, a fighting militia, but also has political power. And now Hezbollah has been definitely weakened, but it's by no means gone away. Still retains a huge amount of support in Lebanon. And what Trump has done is he's cultivated the Lebanese political class, the Lebanese elite, which is not Hezbollah, and it's tried to make a separate deal. And Rubio has gotten a representative of the Lebanese government to go to Washington and negotiate a deal that guarantees supposedly that the Lebanese army is going to go into these occupied zones that the IDF has created in southern Lebanon, and it's going to give those occupied areas back to the Lebanese government, and that will supposedly destroy Hezbollah. By the way, they have no plan to destroy Hezbollah. So this whole thing, again, is a charade. Then the government sending somebody to Washington to sign a deal means absolutely nothing. It will not change anything, except that it will discredit the government in the eyes of the Lebanese people because they will see through it eventually if they don't already, because nothing will happen. Nothing will change. Southern Lebanon is absolutely destroyed. Everything in southern Lebanon is destroyed. And much of Beirut has been attacked and if not destroyed. So the Lebanese people, even those who are not Shia, who are not Hezbollah, I think they may not like Hezbollah for what it's done, but I think they realize there's no friend in Washington, and there probably isn't a friend in the government in Beirut either.
I was just going to add to that I think it's just charades all the way down, including, and this will be the last thing I mention here, I promise, because I've kept you long, but including with Iran. I mean, it seems like every week or two now, it's Trump says we're going to destroy them. The civilization of Iran will be reduced to rubble, and then the next day it's well, we're going back to the negotiating table. Then the next day it's something else, and it's just it's irreality is everywhere now.
Yeah. And if you look at the most recent thing, which is Oman and Iran, according to Trump and Rubio, are about to sign a deal that will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's going to happen Wednesday. It's going to happen Thursday for sure. If not Thursday, it's going to happen Friday. And the beef that I have with the media is they present this with headlines saying Trump says on the verge of a new ceasefire deal, or Trump says we're going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. All these headlines. There's no skepticism whatsoever. There's no part of these articles that they're writing saying, hey, Trump has promised this ever since he started bombing Iran in February. Every day or every week, the war was about to end. And guess what? The war hasn't ended. There's no prospect of the war ending. And even if Iran does agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, remember what happened last time. It was open for a week or two or three, and then it was closed again.
And it's
Because
crazy because go on, I'm sorry.
Iran and the United States are not on the same page. Neither one trusts the other. And for good reason. There's no reason to trust Donald Trump because of the things that I said. He doesn't follow through and do any of the things that he said he was going to do. He probably doesn't even know what he said he's going to do because he's basically has dementia and he's 80 years old. So how can you trust anybody like that? How can the Iranians trust? Now, let's go back to Israel. Israel in February or January before the war started, it presented a plan to Trump. Netanyahu went to the White House and he said to Trump, here are the things we're going to do to topple the Iranian regime. We're going to knock out their entire leadership. We're going to assassinate and kill them, which they did. We're going to create an uprising of the common people because they had been rioting months before against the regime. And we're going to actually create this upswell that's going to popular demand that the regime go. We're going to recruit the Kurds, the Iranian Kurds, the Iraqi Kurds, and we're going to send them as a militia. We're going to arm them and send them into Iran, and they're going to march on Tehran, and they're going to topple the regime. Guess what? None of it happened except what I said about assassinating Khomeini, the Grand Ayatollah, and a large echelon of the political leadership and the military leadership. Guess what? Didn't destroy the regime. The regime is stronger than ever, and it's more radical than ever because the people that took the place of the ones they assassinated are even more radical, more hardline than the ones they eliminated. So this whole thing, the whole Iran, the war against Iran, which Israel dragged the United States and Trump into because he was naive and stupid in believing the Israelis. It's been a disaster, and it's going to drag him down like an albatross, and it's going to lead to a huge drubbing of the Republicans in November.
And just to add to that, I believe the war started on February 28th. So we're almost at the 6 month mark. This is almost half a year of this pointless, stupid war. I'll leave it at that. Is there anything you want to say in closing? Anything I missed or anything you want my listeners to get out of the conversation? And can you also plug the website and your social media?
Thank you. So the website is Tikkun Olam, and the URL for it is richardsilverstein.com. I publish with the New Arab and Jacobin magazine, and I'm on most social media platforms like X and Facebook the Blue Sky and various others. So I would welcome your readers, your subscribers, to take a look at my work.
A special thanks to my $10 and above tier supporters on Patreon, who make this show possible with their generous donations. Producers credits shout out to those supporters: Aaron, Fabian, Jeremy, Matt, Big Bob's Beepers, James, Enoch, David, Sadad, Tristan, Bob, Eva, Miriam, West Bank Robbery Pod, B. Lund, Transnatural Perspectives Podcast, Dan, Nick, Elliot, Fabian, Tom, Arlen, Bo, Spartacus, James, G, Jamie, Will, JC, WV, Sutra, Orc, Catherine, Aaron, Darko, Nathan, Holland, Dan, Mark, Chase, Olm, Gary, Nobody, Emilia, Nick, Brace, Michael, and Brian. Please join those listeners in supporting me at the $10 and above tier of my Patreon page, patreon.com/parallaxviews, if you'd like your very own producer's credit on each and every edition of the program. Until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.